So I think about unique ability, and I think about, if you think about all of the different hats you wear, the things that you do as an entrepreneur, and the things that you get the most joy, the most excitement about, give you the most energy, things that you'd almost do for free, not that you would, but that you feel like, hey, I do that just because I enjoy doing that. That's one of those things that I would classify as a unique ability.
Put that coffee down.
I'm not here to waste your time, okay? And I certainly hope you're not here to waste mine. So I'm gonna keep this short.
Helen, we're both in sales. Let me tell you why I suck as a salesman.
The most valuable commodity I know of is information. Wouldn't you agree?
Coffee's for closers only.
Well, hello there, friends. Welcome back to the Behind Your Back podcast with me, Bradley Hartman. And on this podcast, our goal is to help you sell more, faster, at higher margins, and have more fun doing it. I want to thank our presenting sponsor, Capital One Trade Credit. If you, my friend, are interested in increasing cash flow while increasing revenue, while decreasing risk, that's right, decreasing risk while growing revenue, you will want to check out Capital One Trade Credit. So, Mr. Dave Cubbage, we've done 300 plus episodes. This will be the first time we've ever done a live interactive introduction of the guest with the guest. Are you ready?
Sure, let's go for it.
All right. So we are in spitting distance, not that we would, of the beach here in Santa Monica. So we've got a little background noise. We're outside, having a nice little cocktail. Want to explain to the audience why I was so excited to have you here. First and foremost, I generally don't like saying these nice things directly to your face. You are one of the most thoughtful thinkers for my business that I come to when I'm struggling with something. And you have a gift when it comes to helping me simplify kind of what we're dealing with. And oftentimes I will feel like I'm lost amongst the trees, and talking to you will help me figure out where I need to go. So with that being said, as you know, I generally don't say these things to your face. But let's set the stage beyond that on why I wanted you here. And we're going to talk about growing businesses profitably and some of the tough decisions you need to make. You're going to fill in the blanks. I'm going to say something about you. You're going to have to fill in the blanks, all right? So perfect. Dave Cubbage was born in
Colorado,
and grew up in the city of
Broomfield.
He attended the University of
Colorado State University,
whose mascot is
Go Rams,
and spent the first years of his career in the industry of
grocery retail.
That's right. One of the few industries that enjoys having gross margins far below the lumber and building material industry.
Yeah, 2 to 3%.
Live and die in 2 to 3%. Love it. Okay, so with that context, Dave, let's jump right in. There's this concept we talk about, I've talked about on this podcast consistently. It came from Dan Sullivan. At least it is trademarked. It is registered as something he owns. It's part of our coaching program we talk about often, which is unique ability. Talk to me about unique ability. What is it, and how does it play an important role in your career guiding your business?
Yeah, good question. So I think about unique ability, and I think about all of the different hats you wear, the things that you do as an entrepreneur, and the things that you get the most joy, the most excitement about, give you the most energy, things that you'd almost do for free, not that you would, but that you feel like, hey, I do that just because I enjoy doing that. That's one of those things that I would classify as a unique ability. It feels effortless. Some people would look at it and say, doesn't seem like you're even having to work to think through that and to provide that. And it's because that you're just in your zone.
How might that be different than something that you're just really, really good at, or maybe you're excellent at? And for example, I spent many years managing over and guiding pivot tables and Excel, and I was good at it. One might argue I was excellent at it. I did not like it. Once I left that role, I chose never to use it again. How are those two things different?
So when I was going through trying to define my unique ability and really figure out what those things are, I broke everything that I do as an entrepreneur in kind of 4 different categories. So things that I really think are my unique ability, things that I'm excellent at, but I maybe don't get that same level of energy. I'm really good at, extremely capable, can make a huge impact, add a lot of value there, but it isn't something that I feel like, oh, I get a chance to go do that. So pivot table, probably perfect example. There are things that I'm pretty good at, but probably shouldn't be doing. And there's things that I just shouldn't be doing. So I've got to break everything into those 4 categories when I'm starting to identify, hey, what's in my unique ability? And then you just keep narrowing it down until you really come through with, hey, some specific behaviors, some specific habits or things that you do where you're really making the biggest impact, adding the most value.
Yeah, as you were giving your response right there, it made me think about certain aspects of my unique ability that I need to tell my team to make sure I keep my hands out of the cookie jar there.
Yes.
Because it's not what I do best. It's not where I add the maximum value. It's not what I'm different and better at. Something that comes easily to me, but is really hard for other people. And we all have these. Everyone has these. And while I think sometimes it takes a while to discover it, sometimes you can look at somebody else and be like, this is what you're amazing at. And they're like, what? Oh, you're right. But I find myself as a business owner and a business leader often delving into an area that I might be confident. Maybe I'm competent and confident. Maybe I'm excellent at it. But in terms of growing our business, I have absolutely no business being in there whatsoever. Does this ever happen to someone like you? And how do you think about that?
Yeah, it definitely happens. So I think there's probably different ways. You got probably the way to say, hey, how do you govern yourself? So I think first thing is identifying where all the different hats you wear, all the different things that you do, where do those fall on that table, those 4 different things? And then I think part of it is the ability to govern yourself. But then the other side of that is the ability for your team to govern you, for your team to be aware of what your unique ability is, and then all of the things that aren't, and then empowering them to keep you out of those things, either through delegation or it's through processes. It could be lots of different ways that you slowly exit those pieces, and then going through and measure that. You got to test that and get feedback as to, hey, what does that look like? Where's it showing up? And what do those measures look like? And we do that once a year in our practice, and that really has helped us as a team figure out, hey, where does Dave need to be less and where does Dave need to be more?
Okay, there's a couple things I want to ask you to go a little bit deeper on. I love the word govern you use there. Why do you use that?
Because you go back to the idea. You got these things that you're excellent at, but don't give you joy. And maybe they don't give you joy because you're not really in your true unique ability. You're not add the most value. It's not making the biggest impact on others. So I use that govern word because, yeah, you could go all day long. You could do those things. You could probably be pretty darn successful. But, one of the 4 freedoms we think about as an entrepreneur is the ability to be purposeful, have freedom of purpose.
Right.
Being a unique ability, that matches perfectly to being unique ability, space, and aligning that to your purpose.
Okay. Yeah. No, I think that's a verb I have not used, but to govern oneself, I think in my mind, I'm kind of grappling with it as I'm running my mouth here. But let me ask you about this, and maybe this can be a little asking for a friend segment. Asking for a friend. So say you are a business leader. You've identified what your unique ability is. Say you've put it on paper, and say from the very beginning you've hired individuals and you've really tried to dig deep before you brought them on the team to understand what their unique abilities are. And then you say, well, listen, if I, as the business owner, ever descend into this area or this area of the business, which I shouldn't belong, I want you as an employee of me to feel comfortable to push me out of that. Well, again, it's not me. This is for a friend I'm asking for. Sometimes I get very emotional. I get excited. Sometimes I can be a little forceful. I come in hot and I want things to go a certain way. How might you advise my friend on how to make sure they're empowering their people in a way where they feel comfortable pushing back and saying, you asked me, you gave me permission to push you out of here? Because sometimes you see the owner, you see the CEO, or you see an executive come in hot and you're like, I know what he told me, but that's not the way I'm going to react here. I'm going to stand out of the way and let him do his thing. How might you coach someone up to improve that?
Yeah, I can see that easily being the case. So I think about it. Go back to why you hired the person. So if you've got a team member, you've got a who that you've hired and that they're in a specific role doing a specific thing, that empowerment is critical. It's going to be critical for them to feel like, hey, I'm really part of the team. I'm not just in a role. And I think the other part of it is trust. Trust that they're going to step in when they need to, but also them having the trust that you're going to respect that feedback.
Yeah.
We've got a policy in our team that all progress starts with the truth.
Okay.
And
what does that mean?
Yeah, so that can be a humbling, sometimes a little bit bitter pill to swallow. But it's the idea that if we're not truthful and we don't give real, true, candid feedback on a regular basis, then we're going to mask a lot of things. You're going to have that scenario you just alluded to that I said keep me out of this, but I come in and I'm coming in hot to your phrase, and I got to be in control and I got to be doing this and I got to be that. If my team doesn't have the confidence and the trust that I'm going to respect the boundaries, that I'm giving them that empowerment for a reason, then why give the empowerment to begin with?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think you hit on a word right there that is one of our values, and we strive to do that internally and externally with our clients as well, is be extremely candid. Use candor and come in and be respectful and be thoughtful, but say what needs to be said. And that self-awareness, because I'll have these, and occasionally someone will say, well, you just did this the other day. I'm like, what are you talking about? And they're like, well, you did it right here. And I'm like, that's interesting. That's not the way I viewed it. And it's that self-awareness. And I try to consistently say, I'm giving you permission to do this. And sometimes there's a lot of stuff going on in my head. I'm giving you permission to yank me out of whatever zone I'm in mentally and to force that self-awareness on me, because it's critical. You used a strange little phrase there. You said, say you've got a who. What does that mean? You've got a who?
So I think about entrepreneurship, and there are so many things that aren't in my unique ability. So ideally, if I'm going to really be successful and really be able to go out and grow the business and make a bigger impact to the right people, I've got to figure out, how do I not spend time in those categories where I'm excellent, categories where I'm competent, or even certainly the categories where I'm incompetent.
Right.
So the awareness of where am I spending my time, how is that being allocated, and then think about it. So if you go back to your excellent category, we've got to either have a who, so who, not how, still things that need to happen to move the business forward, to grow the business, to grow the practice. We've got to have someone that is in their unique ability in that space that can take those things and own those and push those all the way across the line. Or we've got to create a process that removes me from being involved in those. So usually, typically, who, not how is a concept that we use constantly, thinking about. It's never of, hey, how do we make this happen? It's who's the right person.
Right. Yeah, I'll back up for just 1 minute. The book that I'm writing with Carl Moyer, who's the HR director of Par Lumber in the Pacific Northwest, it's called Yes, Fear Works, and it's talking about management and leadership. And we kind of went through. So there's kind of 4 levels. So if you're listening to this and you're thinking about, okay, unique ability, what might my unique ability be? And everyone has one, right? And the challenge to grow our business and to have great teamwork is finding people who have a unique ability that's different than what we have and really fit the team's needs. So there's 4 levels. One is, what activities do you do every day that you're incompetent at? Which, Dave, sounds a little aggressive, but it's things you're not good at. You're not comfortable doing. Competent, you're fine. You can do them. Excellent. And then unique ability, right? And I often find the hard part for me is staying out of things that I know I'm excellent at. I'm really good at it. Sometimes I actually like them, but it's not unique ability. And the other concept you just mentioned was who, not how. And these are 3 words. You can have 1 comma. You can delete the comma. I don't think it matters. Once I heard this phrase, I was like, oh my gosh. The answer is almost always who, not how. Very rarely, at least in my experience, and I think you would agree, is you have these things where you're like, oh my gosh, we have absolutely no idea how we get from point A to point B. That, to some degree, you already know. The question is, who do we know? Consultant, inside the team, outside the team. Who do we know that can help us, who has this unique ability that can say, aha, love this. Hard for you, easy for me. And this also often means we need to hire someone else or we need more training, but it's almost always, who do we need to bring in to make this easier, not how. So give me a recent example. Who, not how, where you said, oh, okay, who, not how. Like that was the answer. Light bulb goes off your head and you're like, oh, who, not how.
So sometimes the who is a technology, maybe not a person.
You just blew my mind.
So
go on.
So if I think through this, let's say I'm thinking through the idea of saying, I'm trying to figure out, how do I have some sort of customer relation system, some CRS system that's going to allow me to organize my prospective clients, my my existing clients? How do I handle the right amount of contacts? How am I making sure that I'm staying in communication, staying in front of, and moving things forward? Who might be a really good person who's super strong at plans and organizes, can take a complex system, be able to simplify it, and then help just keep me on track and feeding me that content of who am I contacting, when, what was our last conversation, and it keeps me away from thinking and just doing, staying in my unique ability, which is driving relationships forward, progressing relationships, learning about their problems, helping them solve those. That's where I'm adding the value. But it also could be a technology, could be a contact management system that is a automated piece that you set up with certain parameters that's able to go through and do that.
Yeah, I'm jotting down notes. You're absolutely right. And one that is very specific to what we're doing right now. We're doing more and more video, especially when we have remote guests come on the podcast. And we were using Zoom. The audio wasn't great, and the video was less than great, but it was fine. So we started thinking about, hey, who can we find to help us? We connected with Will, who's edited this podcast, very talented guy, works for Kinsman Sound. Would strongly recommend him to a friend. But there was a different piece, and then we realized the software we're using, it's not Zoom. So we switched to Riverside FM, which is fantastic. So to your point, we had a who as a human, and then we found a who as a technology. But the idea is we could describe what we wanted, right? We could describe how we wanted it to work better. Then the question is, if it's not within our team, how do we find it externally? And that's a great point. Technology, people, absolutely.
Yep. So another example. So right now, I think about within our practice, and we're trying to make some adjustments to figure out, hey, how do we increase the value that we're adding to clients? Part of that's going to accompany our appointment process, conversations we're having. How are we creating the right amount of information going to our prospective or existing clients before we even meet and have that appointment? And so we had to really think through what are all the components of that. We found out that hey, I've got one person on my team, Danielle, who's just an ace at really being out ahead of what needs to happen, having a process and creating that process to where it's just systematic and it's really disciplined. And so as we've rethought that and re-engineered what that needs to look like, she's been an integral part in helping take what our process was, think about what are the components we're starting to add into it, and then how do we level up and really move to the next level on that.
Yeah, one thing we talked about here today, which I found, it's kind of an insight to the obvious, but I think it really provides a vocabulary to something that happens all the time. It happens in our business, and I had multiple examples, some of which we've moved on from, some of which we are in the middle of. We see it with clients all the time, is that sometimes we do not have a clear process that has been simplified, that has been narrowed down, that has been evaluated, and we go try to scale that complexity. Dave, why is it a bad idea to try to scale complexity, grow your business when things have not been simplified and really studied first?
Yeah, well, I mean, outside of the obvious that more complexity seems like the last thing that you'd want.
It is.
I think sometimes for you to think about to grow a business, and it could be in any component you're thinking about, but as you're thinking about you're growing your business, you hit a ceiling of complexity at some point. So all of the things you've said yes to got you to where you're at. And if you're thinking about how do I go to the next level? How do I really move this forward? It's going to be the things you start to say no to that make all of the difference in the world. And sometimes the saying no to certain things, that's the simplification process. So it's try to think about, all right, everything we're doing, if we want to double the size of the business, we can't just do twice the amount of work. So we've got to figure out how do we streamline, where do we simplify, where are we not adding value, what are the things where we've got opportunity, simplify that, get it down to core components, and then from there, at that point, now you're ready to accelerate and break through that glass ceiling.
Yeah, a counterintuitive principle that we found is when you're setting a goal to maybe increase revenue or profitability by 5% or 10%, maybe even 15%, you can just grind it out. You can work harder. You can focus more. You can measure more. You can do different things. But when you say we want to grow by 40% or 50%, sometimes you need to set that high enough where someone says, oh, no, we just can't work 90-hour weeks. That's a bad idea. Someone has to say, well, then everything's got to change. And you're like, okay, that's what we need to do. But the problem with these small goals is we try to keep everything the same and just do more. And I told you this, and one of the things that I've been fascinated to talk to you about over the years, and you have done better than any other business owner I know of, is continually reevaluating who your ideal customer is and making tough decisions when where you want to go and the goals that you have and where you want to spend your limited amount of time of unique ability isn't with the customers that got you here. So can you talk a little bit about that, about how you think about continually growing the business without exponentially adding people, but really by choosing the different customers you have?
Yeah, if I think through that, I think some of that's going to start with, as a team, you've got to get really clear as to what are the attributes your ideal clients have. So who are the clients that you can add the biggest value to? What are the situations that they have? What's the complexity of the situations they have? Who are the people you really enjoy working with? Who are the people that see the value you're adding, so they're willing to either write bigger checks or introduce you to other like-minded people that could be future clients? Like, those are all components that we go through as we think about that. And so if we're thinking we're at a point where, hey, we're at capacity and we've got to make some strategic shifts to simplify, to get down to a little bit more our core roots, then from there, it's a matter of go back and redefine or shore up our ideal client definition and those attributes. And once we see what that piece looks like, then we can run that back against our existing clients or people that we're considering bringing on as clients and say, hey, is there a match? Is there alignment? And if there's not alignment, that's okay. Sometimes we grow and we start to shift as a business owner. You think about where you started as an entrepreneur and the things you were doing to add value. It's an entirely different set of activities than you do now. Fair?
Yes, fair.
Yeah. So this is the evolution that we all have as entrepreneurs. So we go through this, we start to add value, we figure out where that is. And at some point it becomes this point of saying, hey, I'm really more in my unique ability now. The things I add value now are very different than what they used to be. And so we got to really identify what are those attributes. We run that then against our existing clients and say, hey, they've got great situations. They're definitely in need of the value we are, but we probably aren't any longer the very best fit for them. So at that point, it's probably having just a serious conversation with them and talking about where are we going, why do we add value in the places that we do, and the fact that we're not the best fit doesn't mean that they're bad clients. It just means that we're probably not the very best one to work with them. So we've got to work to help them find who would be a better fit working for them. It seems counterintuitive to say we work our tail off, we build a business, and now we're going to reduce clients that we have that are there. But it truly is it's the ability to be able to simplify before you can start to multiply and grow.
Yeah. Well, I think what you said there was profound. I'm going to add a little color, maybe give you a little direction of what we hear in our industry and then kick it back to you. So right now in our industry, we're on allocation. Demand is through the roof. There's not enough material to go around. Builders, GCs, developers, everyone's begging to work with everybody, right? So we're living in the land of plenty, and yet we often find our clients are still with customers who they're not great. They kind of complain. They don't see the true value. Maybe they pay late. And you still hear people kind of complaining about this. And then at the same time, salivating about these other potential customers they could go after. And I will ask, if you can't do that now, what would have to be true for you to do it? Because now would be the ideal time. And what I hear is, well, it just seems really risky of losing revenue, turning money away. Seems like just a bad idea on general principle. Always take the money. Okay. I also hear, well, it'd be a really tough conversation because if I let this customer go, they're going to go to our competitor, but they're on allocation. So this guy's going to go at the bottom of the list, and maybe I'd be responsible for shutting down his business or whatever. And somewhere along the line, he'd be really, really mad at me. And the other thing is that I really like these people. They were really good customers. And, 8 years ago, they were our dream client, but they're not anymore, but I like them. If any one of those reasons was brought up to you by someone you were sitting across, how would you help them think through this principle about at some point, the best service you can do for them and for yourself is to say, we're not a good fit anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. So a couple things there resonate. It's often difficult if you have a scarcity mindset to make those tough strategic decisions about where you should put your capacity and where you shouldn't. So if you have a really thin pipeline and you haven't been working on filling your prospective pipeline and making new relationships and talking about in different ways you can add value, then every client seems like an ideal client. But we know that that's not the case. There are some clients that are going to be more positively impacted, are willing to receive your advice and guidance, to take that, and are going to really benefit from that. And because of all of that added value, you're willing to write you bigger checks. And if you go into it with that scarcity mindset of, boy, if I get rid of these people, I'm either one, who am I going to replace them with? Mm-hmm. So pipeline's thin. I don't see an immediate response. So it takes a certain amount of commitment and courage to be able to go do that. Yeah. Well, the other side of that would be the idea that says, I'm going to have to go work again. I'm going to have to go prospect.
We talk about the annuity mindset, which is, I worked hard a long time ago to get this guy. And now I just, we stay in touch. We go out for beers, and I've earned that. I earned it before. And I just add him to the pile, and I'll just kind of have him until he dies or I die.
Yeah, yeah. And so you're either growing or you're dying. That's an eventual piece. We all face that.
Yeah.
So our business face that. We face that as human beings. We're either learning, we're continuing to expand our minds, we're growing, or we're going the other way. And so you're starting to think about that. You're thinking about your client base and your customer base and the people that you're working with and for, partnering with. Like, what would you rather do? Would you rather say, hey, you know what? Let me identify the ones I am really, really able to add the most value to. Let me work on reducing the number of clients that I'm spending time with so I can allocate that capacity to my really good clients that are already willing to accept the value and add more value, and that most likely probably drives more revenue? Or do I take that extra capacity and go say, hey, how do I go duplicate my very ideal clients? Mm-hmm. I now have a blueprint of who this is. I understand what their attributes are. It makes it a lot easier for me to say yes or no. And so sometimes it just takes the courage to go and move that forward.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. You mentioned scarcity mindset. What is that? And if that's not great, what's the opposite?
Yeah. So scarcity mindset is the idea of exactly what was going through the mind of one of your colleagues there, was saying, well, if I get rid of these people, how am I going to replace the revenue, the income? Like, oh no. The abundance mindset is the complete opposite. That's the other side of the coin. It's saying there are literally thousands and thousands of people in, I'm sure, this industry that would love to have someone that's collaborative, that's working for them, that's able to solve the complex issues, that's committed to see them be successful. They just haven't met you yet. So you've got to put yourself out there. You've got to have the confidence that I know where I add the value, and then figure out how do you go do more of that.
Yeah, and I think what you said was just so important, is that sometimes we overlook what we know to be true, our hard-earned wisdom of just look at the customers you love working with, right? They've become friends and they see all the value, and they might push back a little bit on price, and they're going to complain about your most recent increase, but they understand the value, and there's a degree of loyalty there. Break down, spend some time thinking about that. And what you're going to find is that for your location, wherever you are, there's a small set of customers that all share the same attributes. And it's no wonder. That's why you love working. That's why you're a really good fit. And then you're going to find there's a whole group of people. When we're working with clients, we often do this with a bullseye. We talk about who are the folks that we go down by revenue and profit, and we say, which ones do we love? Put it right in the middle. We could manufacture more of these, we would. And then you go farther out from that and you're like, who are the people out here? Maybe it's a lot of revenue, but everybody can't stand them. And then you have a very visual representation of who you should be targeting more of. But these people are out there, and they just probably are working with, a competitor of yours who doesn't realize all the great things that you do for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And if you think about it, so if you're in sales, you're an entrepreneur, you're growing a business, whatever that is, part of the joy of what you do is working with the people you love the most. Mm-hmm. So just envision the idea that every single prospect or client you worked with was one of those people. You never saw the caller ID come across and you said, oh no, or you felt like, or you're told your team like, no, I'm out of the office, or I'm not available, or like that's the ultimate scenario that we're trying to work towards.
Yeah.
But again, it takes that continual effort of growing your practice, growing your business, feeling confident to scale back. You grew it one time. There's no reason you can't continue to grow it. But every time you grow it back, what you'll find is you replace the revenue you lost with a smaller and smaller number of clients or customers because you're really honing in on where you add the most value, and those are clients are going to be willing to pay you the biggest check. So if you reduce your client count or your customer count by 10 or 20%, you aren't going to have to add back 10 or 20%. You're better now than you were when you built those client relationships 7, 8 years ago. And so quite possibly you add back 2 or 3% more clients and you replace the whole 10 or 20% revenue.
Yeah. No, I think that's so powerful. I'm glad you brought that up is when folks will say, they're like, well, where am I going to get this revenue? I got to find 10 new clients. And you're like, no, you don't. You can replace it with one. And by the way, you know who they are, right? We've targeted them. We've talked about them. It made me realize as you were talking, that's a really good litmus test of just thinking and looking at your customers. And on any given moment, they just call and you look at your phone. Where in the range of, Dave, I might know why he's calling. Maybe he's angry, but I like Dave. It'll be fun. To, gotta take this one, right? These happen to us. The idea is, how can you minimize the calls that you have to take from people that you have zero interest in talking to?
Yeah.
Right? And I think that's a good little test is tomorrow, next time you get a series of phone calls, what percentage of the calls coming in are coming in from people that, and I realize in the environment we're in right now, there's a lot of disappointing that is going on between people who are selling and people who are buying. That's the nature of the business. However, amidst all this, we still have people we love working with, right?
Absolutely.
And if you just find yourself constantly like, not Jimmy, not Jerry. If you find yourself, that's a sign you should be open to, hey, working a little harder. Let's move some of those customers on to someone else who's a better fit. Maybe that's internally. And I think in our industry, Dave, I think it's a little different than yours, but not necessarily, is that those can be moved to some other salesperson. It's not like they have to leave the business. The revenue can stay in there. And this happens all the time. We'll move over kind of a pain in the neck customer from salesman A to salesman B. And year over year, the sales go up crazy. And it wasn't a good fit. And for that reason, they end up buying some of the materials from somebody else. The point is, if you find yourself like not enjoying talking to these folks, that is a sign.
Yeah, well, but even take that. You have a client you're not enjoying working with. You're internally moving from salesperson A to salesperson B. There's a real chance that client doesn't enjoy working with salesperson A anyway. So it could be it could be a breath of fresh air. It could move the client relationship for the company as a whole tremendously, simply because they're now working with someone with a different perspective, a different relationship. They can work on building that from ground zero. So ideally, if you're making that type of situation, especially inside of a internal scenario like that, can it be win-win-win? A win for the client, first and foremost. Can it be a win for salesperson A, and could it be a win for salesperson B? Mm-hmm. You could really make it that way. I think it's the way you present it, it's the communication. It's doing it truly because you know that, hey, this is the best thing for the customer.
Yeah. All right. I'm watching the time here, Dave. I want to finish up on something that we both care a lot about. We're both affectionately book nerds. I would like you to talk about something that I believe you did with Who Not How, the book that was written by Dan Sullivan and is it Dr. Ben Hardy?
I think that's the guy.
That's the guy. All right. They wrote a book called Who Not How. Really good read. And it's a couple hundred pages about the idea that you explained in 5 minutes. So Who Not How, tell us about what you do often when a book comes out like that and you think it's a really important principle. You do something unique for your customers that in the grand scheme of things costs very little, but can have a huge impact. I'm being vague. I'm hoping you know what I'm talking about. I want you to do that and then maybe follow up to close this out with maybe one book recommendation that maybe from a leadership or management perspective has really changed your life. So this is what guests like. They like to be thrown two questions at the same time at the end of a podcast.
That's perfect.
So there you go.
Yes.
What do you got?
Okay, so Who Not How. I took the book. I read it. Man, pretty impactful. It really helped me think through that. As an entrepreneur, I need to share this. So one way you can think about it, you're giving to your clients, to your customers, is to be able to share great ideas, maybe key referral sources, maybe other people you collaborate with in the industry. So I ordered 25 copies of those books. We figured out, hey, who are the list of people I want to send this to? Put a handwritten note in each one and send that out. And that I found over the years has been a great way to help my customers get better. And ultimately, if they get better, I get better. So it really becomes win-win. So we send that out on a pretty regular basis. That was a lot of fun. You're not going to love this, but another book that recently
Behind your back?
No, man. I love that idea. That wasn't the one.
Carry on.
But one of the other books that I've recently done a very similar scenario with was The Gap and the Gain.
Also by Hardy.
Also Dan Sullivan and Dr. Ben Hardy collaboration.
Yes.
But I read it, and I actually read it 2 times in a row. I thought a lot about it. I've got 2 young adult children, 19 and 22, and I thought about, this is impactful. This would be very beneficial for them. And then I thought about other clients or customers I have or other colleagues that have kids, because it's a message that I think it's easy for a lot of people to fall into, is to be always focused on this perfection and never looking back and measuring backwards, which is the whole concept of The Gap and the Gain.
Yeah.
So I just found a lot of value. I think that's a tremendous read. So that's another one I think was really impactful here recently.
Yeah, I think it's such a simple tactic, and I find in our industry, we do not think about customer acquisition cost or the cost of acquiring loyalty. But people love getting things, right? They love getting surprises. I'm pretty sure even for folks that aren't going to read it, no one's going to say, Dave, why would you even send me this book, you jerk? Like, no one's going to say
No chance.
No chance, right? So, and what'd you spend? 25 books, call it $20 a copy, like whatever.
Yeah.
Plus shipping. What do you pay?
$25 copy.
$600 maybe?
5-10 minutes. You write a specific note that's unique to them and specific.
Right.
And I think that's you're talking about ways to increase your client acquisition. Write thank you notes.
Yeah.
Show gratitude. Tie it into a book or surprise and delight type idea. I think it's hard to move relationships forward as much as something like that. No one gets mail anymore. All the mail you get, you go straight from the mailbox to the recycle bin. Maybe it's a bill gets slipped in there, but it pretty much all like no one gets a specific handwritten note for anything. So now you add it to a book that was meaningful. Yeah, it's a no-brainer.
Well, and I know we've experienced this together, and I think it's probably emblematic of life in general. Sometimes the small pieces of wisdom that change the course of a career or a relationship or a life, most of them are not profound. They're small things, but you gotta generally spend a little bit of time with them. And that's why I think books continue to be a really good vehicle for that. So I love the fact that you would just buy 25 copies and just send them out handwritten notes saying, hey, I've been thinking a lot about this. I think this is how it's powerful for me. I thought you'd enjoy it.
Absolutely.
And again, that's an easy way to stand out. And again, if you think about what's the cost of acquiring a customer or the cost of a referral, this pencils out all day in just about any business. So last question was the second part there. As you think about, other than these we've talked about, Who Not How, The Gap and the Gain, both of I would strongly recommend to anybody. I've read them myself. And again, it's a simple idea, but allows you to think through them in more detail. Anything that is not a Dan Sullivan, Dr. Ben Hardy collaboration book that you've read recently or ever that you would say this really stood out in your development as a leader and a business owner?
Yeah. Recently reread, and I did it in a project with my daughter, Winning Friends and Influencing People.
Dale Carnegie.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
it's a
the OG.
classic.
Yeah.
And the newest version, it's got some slide updates and other stuff. Read it with my daughter. She was a freshman in college, and we had an ongoing conversation every single week about, hey, the chapter 2 that she just read, talk through that. And it's awesome to see the impact on her. I think it's probably the 3rd time I've read it. It's just, I think it was originally written in the 1940s. It is absolutely as true today as it was then. And I think that's just a timeless piece that anybody in sales, anybody as a business owner, anybody as an entrepreneur, if you haven't read it recently or haven't read it at all, no brainer. Yeah.
If I can, what were the mechanics of that? Did you said, hey, both of us are going to read chapter 1 and we'll talk on Sunday? How'd you guys do that?
Yeah. So what we worked on is we worked on the idea of saying, hey, and I tried in high school to get it for her, and I told her I'd give her $100 if she read it. And that was she's like, why would you pay me to read a book? Like, what do you think college is going to be?
Legitimate question.
Like, what do you think college is going to be? She just wasn't ready.
Yeah.
She wasn't ready at that point.
Yeah.
But she got into college and she was running up against a couple of things. There was some relationship stuff she had, and she was struggling through and trying to, and I'm usually her go-to to talk through that. Okay. So anyway, that was part of the conversation. It's like, hey, I know I taught you about this. I want to send you another copy. Open it up. Read a chapter. If you don't get anything out of the first chapter, I want to ask you again.
Sure.
She read the first chapter. She's like, okay, I get it. She gets all the way through the book. It comes back. And then it's almost a little feisty a little bit with it because she's seen things I've done, behaviors I've exhibited with her. Like I refuse to get into an argument with her. And she starts to argue a point, and my response to be like, okay. And she's like, oh my goodness, I know what you were doing. Like
this is your playbook. You are Dale Carnegie.
Yeah. So it wasn't, I'm not Dale Carnegie, but it makes tons of sense. But that's, again, it's an easy concept, take out of a great book. So anyway, I think it's been transformational for her. Yeah. I've got a lot of other friends or colleagues that have suggested that too.
Yep.
Yeah. Great read.
Yeah. And I often talk to leaders who get frustrated where they'll send out a podcast or they'll send a book or they'll send a video. And they're like, send it to 50 of my people. Not one watched it. I'm done. And I'm like, whoa. Can't be done, right? You can't be done. You got to continue to offer those things. And only if one person takes you up on your recommendation, you need a lot of things to go right. You need, that old phrase that, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. Sometimes you got to reinforce it and remind them and offer it up and say, I'll buy you another book. I'll buy you another book. And know that if just one of these individuals reads it and it resonates, their behavioral change and maybe what happens next will more than compensate for all the time and energy and capital that went into the previous 500 recommendations to everybody else combined,
Yeah.
So you got to continue to do that. And I know it can be disheartening for business owners that see it as an expense and just get frustrated because, hey, if there's something so valuable and I'm telling you, I've already done the work, I've read it, I'm not giving you something that, it's going to be a flyer, it can be disheartening, but I would tell folks, stay with it. Just keep doing the right thing, which is leading and making the recommendation, and
absolutely
things tend to work out.
Yeah. You're doing it not because you're talking about a book that you read. You're doing it because you care about them.
Yes.
Person you work with, someone on your team, family member, friend, doesn't matter. You're doing it because you care. It was impactful for you. You're never going to go wrong sharing that.
Yep. All right, my man. Well, hey, I knew this was a podcast a long time in the waiting. I think I asked you a couple of years ago. You dodged and weaved for a while. Finally made it happen here.
I'm gonna blame COVID.
That's fair. Anyway, appreciate you being on the show. You continue to add value to my life. So, my friend, thank you very much. I really value our relationship and my business. And I would say the things you shared with me, I've applied in my business and then shared with our clients, probably in ways that you do not understand. Things that you've shared with me have been shared with our clients and our industry. So thank you very much.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity. It's cool to finally do it. Thanks for taking the time.
You got it. All right, my friends, that is all with my friend, Mr. Dave Cubbage. As always, we want to thank our presenting sponsor, Capital One Trade Credit. If you are interested in checking out and borrowing a state-of-the-art digital platform that makes it easier for your customers to buy from you, you will want to check out Capital One Trade Credit. And as always, we are going to close out with our leadership mantra. You, my friend, are owed nothing.
Deliver value first.
Thanks for listening. Make it a great week.